All right, we're live.
We're live.
Okay, welcome to the Nobody Cares podcast, episode 1016. Right?
Sure. Hey, prove it's not.
And we just did a hashtag for Nobody Cares, and there's 200,000 pieces of content that says we're number one.
I love it.
We are the greatest Nobody Cares podcast here. My name is Mike Frazier.
I'm Casey Peterson. I just got done posting 200,000 tweets.
Casey's got
fingers are a little tired.
He's got a bot army in Bangladesh. The Bangladeshi bot army.
Awesome. Well, let's talk.
John Andrews.
Yeah, there he is.
Not in Bangladesh. Currently. Could be.
In transit
to Bangladesh.
So let's talk community today. Nobody cares about community. I had a new client meeting last week. Well, new prospect, and like every new meeting, when you're meeting for the first time, there's always that Q&A answer. Where they just kind of go and they pick your brain, and I won't say who they are, but they sell a lot of widgets. So they're an e-commerce model, and he was like, in its competitive market, and he was like, well, what helps me, what prevents a customer from, rapidly searching and going with the lowest, cheapest price? And I said, nothing. Nothing at all. I mean, what you need to do is focus on the community. And when I said community, it was just like a blank stare on his face, and he didn't know what I was talking about. And it kind of took me by surprise because, 2019, I thought, most brands know about communities. So, I went into what a community is and how he should be going about building it. And, the more I got into this conversation, it was just like a blank, it was like a big eyes, right? Like, just didn't know what to do. So then, I told him about apps like Photify, where you empower your all your employees, your whole team, to get the conversation going, and because they have friends and followers, and it's a word of mouth game. And then you post stuff that's valuable to your up and coming community of people that want to follow you. So I don't know. It's just, I told them about loyalty and trust that you build within it. And that way it kind of eliminates the lowest, cheapest price search that you probably don't want to, go after anyway with those type of people. So anyways, I thought I'd throw that out there, and see what you guys think, but it kind of caught me by surprise.
Well, what was his response? Did he understand like how a community could help him actually with that initial question that he asked you of well, what if I'm just searching for the lowest price or whatever? Did that make sense?
Yeah, I think it did, once I went through it, and, but then the next question was, well, how do I do it? And I'm like, well, I'll write a proposal up and, work with your team. But it's a whole it's a whole service it's just something that he wasn't expecting, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
It's interesting. I had a similar experience Friday. I met with an organization that has a local organization has 15,000 members, and probably another, call it 30,000 closely associated people, right? And it was interesting too, because the first thing I want to talk about is, well, what do we need to do with our website? And I'm like, I have no clue. Like, I'm sure your website's fine and nobody actually cares about your website. They're coming to your website to get information, to get contact stuff, whatever. It's a utility. But that's not where people are interacting with you. People are interacting with you, and this is a youth organization. People are interacting with you through the lives of your members, and their parents and grandparents, right? And I said, if you can empower them to make content with your assets, but in their voice and in their, their channels, your footprint will be massive. If you think about your Facebook page and Twitter and LinkedIn and whatever, I mean, that's great. That's great. You need that. But that's not how people interact with others today. They interact with each other. Facebook or LinkedIn today. I'm on LinkedIn, and one of the first things I see is an article Casey has shared. Well, that's because LinkedIn says John and Casey are connected. John is interested in things that Casey talks about, and sure enough, there's an article, and I was interested in it. Commented on it and said, imagine that at scale with your people, your partners, your influencers, your haters. I don't know. It really has the opportunity to be transformative if you think about content as a form of community.
Yeah, I find too, though, with many conversations, so it always brings me back to my first job. I had been in finance, and I ended up talking with a lot of small business owners, and the number one question they had was about marketing, and how to spend money in marketing, and how to budget for marketing, and that sort of thing. And so I found myself learning a lot about marketing to answer their questions. And my first job that I got in actual marketing was for a small skin product manufacturer, and they sit me down on my first day, and they say, we made a website a year ago, and we just knew that was it. Because we made a website, man, we were just we ordered they had a whole back storeroom literally filled floor to ceiling with product that they hadn't sold, because they just bought so much, knowing that because now they have a website, everybody's going to buy it.
Can you imagine going to bed that night that your website went up and you thought, man, when I wake up in the morning, I'm going to be wealthy.
Right.
Because everybody's going to order shit from
so this was
my website.
Back around 2005 or so. And, that was there was a lot of people who got into online stuff with the idea like, oh man, I've made a website, I'm going to make a lot of money. And I think people did the same thing with social media when it came around, and with influencers, and with
email,
and blogs, and
text,
anything.
And whatever.
This is new. I made a Facebook page. Gosh, where's all my money? And And so it's still a difficult conversation to have with a lot of brands who maybe started a Facebook page and realized they weren't making a whole bunch of cash from it. And I don't get it. I don't necessarily understand the fact that I have to produce content. I have to make stuff for my community, and it's not actually about selling stuff. There's a major retailer here in the U.S. that I had a lot of interaction with over a few years at a previous job, and actually was very, very involved in their social media accounts and that sort of thing. And I recall the person over their digital stuff sitting down and saying, hey, we're not going to really produce content anymore. We're just going to do promotional posts, and we're going to put ad money behind them, and that's all we're going to do, because nobody will ever make money in content and in community and in what we're talking about. And I think it's a great title. Nobody cares about community, because I think they don't
what you're describing, though, is I think where a lot of people get to. And Mike, you touched on a little of this. Content's hard, right? It's hard. It's time consuming. I can't necessarily see a direct impact if I produce a piece of content to selling something, but we know over time, he with the most content, she with the most content wins because of what the impact that it has on exactly what your customer is worried about. Well, what if somebody just finds something cheaper from somebody else? So I was doing some research today for a new real estate partner that we have, and was thinking about this idea of content communities. And I think a great representation when I talk to somebody about content communities, I just show them a hashtag on Instagram, right? So do a hashtag search on anything on Instagram, and you'll instantly be into a content community of people you don't know, which I kind of think is different than thinking about the way most social media works. Is I follow Casey, right? Well, Casey's great. He's really smart. And he's whatever. But I may just want to follow, shopper marketing, which Casey talks a lot about. But there's probably a lot of other people that have great stuff too that I want to follow. So I just searched because I wondered how much at the local level existed for Raleigh real estate. And so I searched that hashtag on Instagram. There are 35,000 pieces of content. I think I told you guys a bigger number when we first started. So I went and actually checked because
that's still a lot of content because
internet.
A lot of houses in Raleigh.
Raleigh's not a big place, right? So
I'm from South Arkansas.
Right? It's bigger than South
I think
Arkansas.
It's pretty big.
But I mean, if you think about the city or the area, the DMA of Raleigh has 35,000 posts just on Instagram about Raleigh real estate. And the opportunity for a large real estate firm to really just be able to, they could empirically know what share of voice their brand had in that footprint, right? You could. Mm-hmm. And if they empowered their people with tools to make content, and even their customers or even their partners, imagine how they could have an ad vehicle that's content driven ad vehicle that's not advertising, that's not interrupting me a lot, but it's there when I go to seek what's going on in Raleigh real estate. Right?
Yeah, I think the problem is what you said, is that the result of this work is it's months down the road. I mean, this is a strategy you start on with a long goal in mind, and it takes months to establish, and you may see people outpacing you in your own industry over the short term. But if you're the one who has content, I'm gonna give you an example that I stumbled across this morning that I thought was fascinating. If I cannot think of a brand that on face value would be more irrelevant to today's consumer than this brand.
Nope.
That has gone all in on content community. I think you should go check it out on Facebook right now. 2 million people in their content community. It is highly, highly engaging content. That is the Farmer's Almanac.
Farmer's Almanac has a community of two. Well, that makes sense, right?
Yeah. Well, and it's all, they're not trying to sell you the Farmer's Almanac. I don't know how they're making money off this, but they have content all day long that's interesting. They have people that are highly engaged with their content. They have totally reinvented a brand that should be totally irrelevant as something that is a real community. There's no other explanation. I mean, they've built a community based on content that their people really want to see. It's almost 100% like interesting lifestyle type content that people are interested in reading.
It's not an ad. People are seeking that out.
Yeah.
They're seeking that content out, or it's showing up in other things that they may be looking for, like weather or planning stuff, or I don't know what people use the Farmer's Almanac for exactly, but
my grandfather loved the Farmer's Almanac.
No, I still love reading that thing,
right? But I have not heard the name Farmer's Almanac since I was a child, and my grandfather was looking up to see how the weather was going to be that year.
So I wonder if the farmers only dating site would maybe they could get in there and do some stuff. How are you, Mike? You have a content community, Pints, Forks, and Friends. Tell us about that.
I did. Side story though. I remember in 2001, I got an email list from one of these local chamber of commerce, and I was like, "All right, man, we're just gonna blast all those people and watch the money roll in."
How'd that work out?
Yeah. It was like well, back then it was before like MailChimp and some of the analytics, but not very many sales.
But you know, it's amazing to me. We've talked about this before. Brands that I get emails from every day, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're just doing that math of, well, if I send 1 million emails every day, I get X dollars in sales. So if I send 2 million emails, I should get 2X million dollars in sales, right? I mean, that's the math everybody's doing. And screw it if it kills my brand or I don't care or whatever. Right. It's just making more money. You know, it's a mentality that I think. And by the way, email works great. It's awesome. But you know, if you put some of that effort into having content when people are actually looking for it, imagine the warmer brand connection that you would have as a brand with people instead of just spamming me every day into, you know.
Oh, totally. And then if you have a genuine community and part of that community is an email list that people, you know, actually want it, I mean, it's still relevant. So, I mean, I guess it all depends on how you kind of steer them, you know, to where, you know, they're getting, you know, their updates and where they want to get it, I guess, you know. So you have to be fluid, right? You need to go to where they want to be.
I get emails from Trulia every day, and it'll have 10 pieces of content. So basically, it's got 10 homes that are for sale in Raleigh, in New Bern, and Winter Park, which are all places that I've searched for home values on Trulia. And I read that damn thing every day because it's got new, fresh, like, it's interesting to me. I'm not in the market to buy a home. I just love being a home stalker. Voyeur.
House
trying
voyeur.
to stay away from that word, but yeah, whatever.
Yeah. And then going back to, you know, you can, you know, create your own communities from the ground up. You know, if you hashtag Pints Fork Friends on Instagram, you know, it's a smaller but thriving community. I mean, you go in there and you'll meet all of us, you'll meet other people, and they're all really engaged, you know. So you start sharing, you know, your beer picks or your barbecue or whatever, you know.
If I could find a stamp, I would make more content.
Right.
Well, there was an app for that.
Nobody tags it.
Right.
Can we just tag it? I can't.
I'll tag it.
I'm
sure I can.
I can't find it.
I'm sure I can figure out how to tag it.
Anyway.
Yeah. So I mean, and that was part of the thing I shared with this prospect. You know, I'm like, well, here's a real life working community that was built from zero. You know, so I think when you show, Eddie
Rubin using that thing pretty heavy.
Yeah.
He was posting his beers and when he was skiing in Utah last week.
I know. He gave me a shout out.
I saw that
on the big stage.
On the big page.
Wow. He got a lot of snow in Alta. I was jealous.
They did. They got some serious. They got hit with that storm right as we were getting out of Denver.
Man, crazy. But the cool thing is with a community, you know, when you travel, I was in Indianapolis with my daughter. We did like a little road trip with her with her employer, and I've never been to last time I was in Indianapolis was in the 80s. So I was blown away with how, obviously with Google Maps, you know, you can find the cool places to eat within, and then I share it within Pints Fork Friends community. And, you know, people are reaching out to me. They're like, oh, you got to try this place, or you got to try this brewery. And I found, you know, a great craft beer brewery called Sun King. It was amazing.
I think that's the piece that people don't understand as well too, and it's going to have super relevance with voice. But if you're in Waze and you search craft beer with Waze, it's using content to give you results, right? It's just a Google search. It's a specialized Google search, but it's a Google search. So if you're a local, you know, if you're Raleigh Brewing here in Raleigh, or Lone Rider, and you've created content, and your customers have created content, and beer influencers like you have created content, the likelihood of you showing up in that search, which is the main way that I search for stuff when I'm traveling now, is going to be higher, and it's going to be higher than a paid ad, that I'm not going to click on anyway. But I love that map search functionality, and I think voice is going to work exactly the same way. Hey Siri, find craft beer near me. It is a search that's driven by content.
Yeah, and so we found a brewery before we found Sun King, and it was called St. Joseph, and it was a brewery that was that was in a church, converted brewery, or converted church into a brewery, and it was pretty good. The beer was okay, and so I'm sharing that to Pines Forks Friends community, and then before I know it, they're like, no, you gotta go to Sun King. I'm like, oh, okay.
So they let your community jumped in and let you know.
Yeah, exactly.
That's very cool.
The party was at Sun King.
And everybody knew.
Yeah, you walk in and there's all these medals, all their awards on the wall. I'm like, okay, yeah, I get it.
So do you think that every brand, and this is something I think about, like, do you think that every brand can do this? Or is there a limit to a number of brands in an industry that could effectively build community?
Well, so my answer to that question would be this. I think it's a lot easier for every brand to use email, digital ad retargeting, all that stuff, which is why you see saturation in those places. I think the benefit in content is most brands are not going to do it.
Yeah, right.
So I think because of the difficulty and because of the non-push button nature of the thing, it's great. I believe that with our perspective at Photify, the larger your community is, the better. But that could also work in on the flip side, in the inverse of that, is niche communities are going to have really probably stronger audiences, right? So if think about if you're in a community. I've noticed some of the communities of people who suffer from disease, like the celiacs community, really powerful community, right? Imagine what you could do as a brand that helps people with celiac disease in being part of that community. Again, not advertising to that community, but participating in that community, answering people's questions like Mike's community did. Participating in that. Again, harder than advertising too, but I think much more effective and much more lasting over the long term.
Mike, what should a brand do if they realize I want to get started and I want to build a community? Where do I start?
Well, I think depending on what type of brand it is, you kind of gravitate towards the social media platform that matches that attention, and then on it, you kind of build out your persona, right? Who's your target? What are their likes? What are their interests? And you start posting things around that. Then you find hashtags, where those type of people would be, and then oh my God, you actually start talking to them. You like their stuff, and maybe you answer one of their questions, or you provide a funny response that gets the conversation started. And I think that's where the employee side comes into play, because they're real people at that point. It's not just the brand that's just the logo talking to people. I think you really have to open the doors and let your employees be part of the voice. And I think it's kind of a point that hasn't happened yet. I think the brands want to control everything, and the agencies want to control everything, and I think apps like Photify kind of empower the employee if they would just let it happen. So I think they just need just real conversations need to start happening around people that are good matches for the brands. I think. I mean, at the end of the day, I think that's what it is.
I think brands have to, and I don't think it matters if you do it in-house or if you do it with an agency, but I think you have to find the right people on those accounts being real humans, and you have to turn them loose to do it. There's a major company that I've sat down with some of their digital marketing team several years ago, and the level of approval that they had to go through just to respond to someone who asked a question on Twitter or Facebook was a nightmare.
Yeah.
I mean, it took hours, if not days, and had to touch several people's hands, had to go through legal approval, and then they could respond. But by then it was devoid of any personality at all, and absolutely worthless.
I feel like, and maybe I'm just wishful thinking, but I feel like some of that is starting to go away.
I agree.
People understand. Look, what I say to people a lot. We'll talk to a lot of retailers, and they'll be, oh, I'm not sure I want our people to make content yet. And I'm like, yeah, but if I walked into your store and I asked Casey, hey, can you help me, find this thing in my store, or I need a return, or I have a question about this product, or whatever, you would expect that person to help me, right?
Yep.
So how's digital any different? And I think that starts to create
I love that mentality. I think that brands so Ford is a good example. I think they got around that because they allowed their digital social web person to become a personality in his own right. Back when Scott Monty was there. And everyone knew when Scott Monty responded that Ford was responded.
Yeah.
Right? It was Ford's insight that was coming out of him in regards to whatever was going on. But he could get by with a whole lot more than coming from the Ford handle. No shareholders were going to get upset because Scott Monty responded to a blogger asking about the new Ford F-150 on Twitter.
Right.
But they very well may get upset if Ford did.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and imagine that drilled down then to the local level.
Right.
Right. And your local Ford salesperson sharing their view of that product. That's the person who's going to sell that truck, by the way. Right. And so if I have a relationship with them, Ford's ability to connect with me it is now something it could never accomplish from the corporate marketing level. Never can it accomplish that. It can advertise to me locally. Lots of tools for it to be able to do that. To be able to build that relationship depends on that salesperson at my local Ford dealership, which by the way, is the thing that's going to matter to me anyway, because when I have questions, when I have a problem, my car needs service, when I want to send my friends to somebody, that's the person that I'm going to connect with. So that person having a digital relationship with me on Instagram or LinkedIn or wherever totally makes sense, right? For that person. So what do they have to create? To your point, give them a tool set.
Yep.
Good stuff.
Well, we have any parting thoughts on this topic, Mike? John?
I can't strive enough how important it is. I think everybody should market like a food truck, because you don't get any more bare bones community driven talking to the chef, is he making your food, type of relationship. So I think if more brands of all shapes and sizes would just do that, just empower their team, their publishing unit, their employees to somehow become a voice of the brand. I don't know. I think that's the future.
Agreed.
All
right,
cool.
This was episode 1016
in the books.
I think it's in the books.
The Nobody Cares podcast.
So can you put the link to Pints, Forks, and Friends, and then maybe the Amex article on?
Yeah, I don't think we mentioned the Amex article directly in this, but we'll share that link down below. And
that was helpful.
It was very helpful. There was a line in there I really liked, which is your goal should be to build the most vibrant community about your subject online. not to monetize your community, not to have it be the biggest, but to build the most vibrant and engaged community. If that's your goal, I think that moves you way far down the path of actually becoming a brand that embraces community.
And you can build metrics around that too, right?
Yeah.
Which is it's not just about sales, but are people actually participating when I don't participate? That could be a great sign, because that means community is now taking root.
Yep.
So hey, I love the food truck example, Mike. That
is awesome.
You got to write a book.
Let's do it.
Food truck marketing.
Yep.
All right. This is episode
whatever.
Nobody
cares.
Nobody even cares enough to keep track.
It might be